Hello and welcome to Tete a Tete here on France 24. Our guest this week is Majed al-Ansari. He is an advisor to Qatar's Prime Minister. He's also the spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry, and he joins us from Doha. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
So in Gaza, a ceasefire began on January 19th after long and very complicated talks mediated by the US, Egypt, and of course Qatar. Your prime minister claims the agreement could have been reached as soon as December 2023. That is 2 months after the Hamas attack and the Israeli retaliation in Gaza. Why didn't it happen then?
Well, Mark, there is a myriad of reasons to be considered when thinking why this deal hasn't happened. But I think one of the foremost reasons was the political posturing by both sides and dragging their heels into an agreement. On the 27th of May, we had the similar language on the table. Very little has changed between the 27th of May document and the document we have right now. And I think it's the political will and the political pressure that came at the last month that made the deal possible and got us to a point where now the people in Gaza have a respite and they are trying to go back to their lives, and the hostages are back with their families in Israel.
When you mean the political pressure in the last month, does it mean Donald Trump? Was he the decisive factor to push this to the finish line?
The statements by President Trump were the main reason behind the momentum that was created, the efforts by envoy Witkoff, who was not only here in Doha, but also in Israel, and was there until the last minute of the negotiations under the guidance of President Trump to end this now and to start the pause immediately. And it's their push that actually got this across the lines. And this is why we highly appreciate their role in this mediation. And obviously, a lot of the issues that were pending between both sides were solved within the 460 days, more than 460 days it took to reach this agreement. But certainly what got it across the line was the statements and the actions by the incoming administration.
It's a three-phase mechanism that was put in place. Your prime minister, again, Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman al-Thani, said to an Israeli TV recently that he kind of regrets that it's a three-phase mechanism. He would have been in favor of a ceasefire that basically deals with all the issues all at once. Can you explain?
Mark, if it was left to us, this war would have never happened. And obviously, we don't see any justification for the hardship, for the death of so many civilians on both sides, but especially in Gaza, for the human catastrophe that's taking place in Gaza. And obviously, if the politicians were able to make this deal at any time, Qatar would be there to help with the mediation process. This is the realistic approach, which we thought would get both sides on the table, which we thought would get us to the finish line. And it is not necessarily our ambition, which is to end this war immediately and to reach a sustainable peace immediately, but we are working within the confines of what is possible. And this very difficult mediation between sides that have almost no trust in each other.
Right. Obviously, the first phase is being implemented. There have been ups and downs already, but many observers are very worried about phase two because it's much more sensitive. Both sides have said they're ready to resume fighting. How advanced are the talks for phase two? Are you waiting for the end of phase one, or are you already negotiating phase two, and how far in the negotiations are you?
So as per the agreement, Mark, the 16th day of the pause is when where the negotiations for phase two will begin. So we are waiting for that deadline, but we're not sitting there with idle hands. What we are doing right now is we are communicating with both sides. We're laying the ground. We're making the preparations to make sure that we hit the ground running on the 16th day, which will be middle of next week or beginning of next week. We can't right now put any emphasis, on how exactly these talks will go. We have to wait on the 16th and see the seriousness on both sides in engaging. What we are hoping for is that with the pressure from the U.S. administration, from the international community, with the positive notes that are coming out of this pause, with hostages being returned to their families, with civilians returning to the north in Gaza, the reality on the ground and the pressure from the international community would push both sides to start negotiating in good faith, and therefore would help us in our job in meeting with our partners in Egypt and the US, and in getting this across the line for a second phase, which is the bigger step towards a sustainable peace in the region.
Right, but what you're describing means it's an extremely fragile ceasefire, because if they have to negotiate this very complicated phase two without having really prepared the ground, this means anything could happen and this ceasefire could disappear in a second, right?
Certainly, Mark. Obviously, we've had so many discussions in the past year and a half between both sides. We have identified everything that is of interest to both sides within that issue. So a lot of the issues have been discussed once and again throughout the different phases of the negotiation that took place. The actual negotiations will begin on the 16th. As I said, we are laying the ground for it. We are talking to both sides, but we have a commitment within the agreement that the talks would not begin until the 16th. The Prime Minister said in a previous interview that we hope that we can start these talks even before the 16th, but we are moving towards that deadline, and it's approaching quite rapidly. Now, is it an easy discussion? No. Is it a guaranteed discussion? No. Do we have faith in the process? Yes. Do we have faith in the work that we have done with our partners in the mediation since we began? Yes. Do we think that there are things that need to be done before we reach an agreement on phase two? Yes. And are we really in a situation right now to say with confidence that we will have a phase two agreement signed days after we start negotiations? No, we are not. But we are committed to the process. We believe in the process. We have shown that the process works. 109 hostages were back with their families as a result of the first pause. Already we have 7 hostages back with their families as a result of this pause. We have stopped the killing of the people in Gaza 7 days in the first pause, and now more than a week, and almost 2 weeks in this pause. The only light that is coming out of this crisis was through the mediation, through the process, and through the talks, not through any other method.
Right. What do you make of Donald Trump's claims that Palestinians should be moved from Gaza into Egypt and Jordan? How does that help the process?
Well, let me start, Mark, by saying that we have full confidence in our partnership with the U.S. administration. I have said it very bluntly. If it wasn't for the incoming administration, for the Trump administration, while they were in transition, investing so much time and effort in getting this deal crossed, it would have never happened. We believe that they have a sense of ownership towards this deal, and we believe that they also believe in the process. Now, obviously, we will disagree over a lot of ideas. Over that issue, we have always said that the only solution to the Palestinian issue, to the security issue between Israel and the Palestinian people, is through the two-state solution and through a pathway to peace that needs to acknowledge the right of Palestinians to return to their lands. We have our frank and open discussions with the U.S. administration. We are working with them very closely, and we hope that through this engagement, we would be able to reach a consensus over the future of the region.
You mentioned the special envoy, Steve Witkoff. He said Qatar could be the next to join the Abraham Accords, normalization with Israel. Is he right?
The position of the state of Qatar has been always consistent and very clear. Pathway to the normalization of relations in the whole region with Israel is through a solution to the Palestinian issue. We have committed in the Arab Peace Initiative with our partners in the region that the whole region would collectively normalize relations with Israel the moment that we have a pathway to peace and we have a two-state solution implemented on the ground. Our position has not changed, and we have always said that we are open to these relations when peace happens and when we have a sustainable solution to the Palestinian issue.
A solution meaning a state, right? To be clear.
Meaning two states living side by side and the Palestinian people returning to their lands according to the 1967 borders and the Security Council resolutions to such effect.
Quickly on U.S.-Iran relations, obviously there's tension also obviously between Israel and Iran because of fears that Israel might strike Iran's nuclear sites. Is Qatar trying to mend fences between Tehran and Washington and Tehran and Jerusalem?
Our mediators have always played a significant part in the relations between Iran and the West in general, more recently in de-escalating between Iran and Israel. And we have had many successes between Iran and the United States. And we believe that our track record, speaks for itself when it comes to that file. Right now, Mark, not to put a lot of detail on it, but we have 10 mediations working at the same time right now in the Qatari Foreign Ministry under the guidance of His Excellency the Prime Minister and the Minister of State. And therefore, amongst those, of course, it's the talks that we are having with our counterparts in Iran, in the United States, in various Western countries to see how we can de-escalate in the region as a whole. And we have always been quite resourceful when it comes to these kind of mediations.
Right. How concerned are you about a war with Iran?
Well, I think that we have a moment right now in the region, a moment of relative stability, a moment of relative calm that we need to build upon. And it's something I think that the government in Tehran realizes and has shown a lot of openness to talks and to dialogue. And the same is for other parties in the region. And therefore, we are always willing to talk. And we have always said that the issues in the region will not be solved in the battlefield. They will be solved on the negotiation table and in healthy neighborly relations.
Majed al-Ansari, I want to thank you very much for being our guest here on Tête à Tête. And thank you all for watching this show on France 24.